Welcome, everybody. This is Planning and Development Committee. We have a quorum, and the first item on our agenda is approval of the regular minutes of March 24th.
Move approval. Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. The first item on our agenda is P1. I'm looking around to see. Pardon me? First item on our agenda is Resolution 18R14, which is designating a portion of Emerson Street between Asbury Avenue and Green Bay Road with the honorary street name sign Hecky Powell Way. Mr. McCray.
Yes.
Oh, is there a second?
Yes, second.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Yes, being recommended from the Public Naming Committee unanimously is a street sign for Mr. Hecky Powell and his numerous contributions to the Evanston community, honoring him and his stretch of that block immediately abutting his property there on Green Bay Road. So we look upon it favorably, and staff supports.
We're going to have a discussion about this.
It was recommended by Alderman Holmes.
I see.
I would defer.
Alderman Holmes.
Alderman Rainey, this is the 30th anniversary of Hecky's, and this year, and so we're going to do this for him. Want to do this for him, and I'm going to tell everybody it's a secret. Hecky doesn't know yet, so and we haven't come up with a date, but we'll let everyone know the date once we get that settled.
You'll probably know after tonight.
Yeah. No, well, we've got him away from. I talked to his wife. We have him away from television or anything else, and hopefully nobody will tell him.
Okay. All right. Anybody else want to speak to this? Hearing no other comments, all those in favor of recommending this to the council, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Okay. Next is Resolution 19R14, designating a portion of Dodge Avenue between Main Street and Lee Street with the honorary street name sign, Crown Family Way.
Second.
All right. Mr. McCray, this is a good one.
Did not want to be presumptuous. So, Madam Chair, members of the committee, yes, the Public Naming Committee also recommends unanimously naming the 900 block of Dodge Crown Way in honor of the Crown family and all their contributions in terms of the Robert Crown Center. This recommendation comes from Alderman Wilson with his endorsement. It was also made by our Park and Rec Board President Dan Stein and his wife.
Excellent idea. All right. Any discussion on this? Alderman Wilson?
I think it would be a nice thing to do and appropriate. The Crown Center and the other contributions the Crown family have made to this city have really made an impact in a very significant way and in an ongoing way. And I appreciate Lisa and Dan making this suggestion, and hope everyone will support that.
Excellent idea. All right. All those in favor of recommending this to the council, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Moving on. P3, Ordinance 48014. We're being asked to recommend the adoption of Ordinance 48014, granting a special use permit for a Type 2 restaurant, Starbucks, and a drive-through facility at 1901 Dempster Street, which would occupy the long vacant Kentucky Fried Chicken structure. Could I have a second?
Second.
All right. Mr. Munzer, you'd like to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mark Munzer, Director of Community Development. Just to reiterate the packet that is in, or the memo that's in your packet, staff and the zoning board recommend approval of this project. As noted, it's been a building that's been vacant for about 3 years at a key intersection in the community. The staff and the ZBA felt that it met all the requirements of a special use. It did place 3 conditions, which are in your packet, that the hours are limited to 5 a.m. to midnight, 7 days a week, and that the applicant comply with the litter collection and garbage pickup plan, which they have done so. So we recommend approval, and the applicant is here if there's any questions.
Good evening. Would you like to say a few words, even if we don't have questions?
Yes, my name is Mamie Yee. I'm real estate manager for Starbucks. We're very excited to look at this opportunity and to come to Evanston. This would be our 7th store in Evanston, and Scott Goldman, the developer here, has also done a similar site for us in Naperville, exactly the same type of KFC building that's being renovated. And so we look forward to, any questions that you may have into opening here.
Well, it's a perfect use because KFC restricts the users of their properties to anybody who competes with any of their food groups, which would all have to do with fried. Alderman Wilson.
And the question that I keep hearing is, do you know about when you'll be opening?
Oh, yes.
People are very excited.
If we can, in a perfect timing, in terms of getting all of our drawings done and getting the permits and getting all the construction done, we would like to open either in September or October of this year. So very soon. We are trying to fast track this and wrapping up the final details of the lease.
Thank you.
Right. Alderman Wilson, I noticed that it is a request to suspend the rules on this. It's not yours, right? It's Alderman Braithwaite, right?
Right.
And he has requested, I'm sorry, I thought it was in your ward. He has requested that we suspend the rules. So I'll make a motion here that the committee approve suspending the rules later.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Alderman Tindem, you agree? All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, and we'll move suspension of the rules, which means instead of having to wait 2 weeks for the item to come up after it's been read, it'll be approved tonight for action.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. All right, we now have P4 and P5. Ordinance P4 is granting a special use permit for a planned development for 1515 Chicago Avenue. There are two ordinances. The other is 53014, has to do with the same special use. One requires conditions of preserving an elm tree that is in the alley, and the other permits the removal of the elm tree with other requirements added to that privilege of removing the elm tree. So could we move them both and then have a discussion?
I would move both
Okay.
P4 and P5.
All right.
Second both.
Okay. All right. Now we have several PowerPoint presentations from residents and from the developer's attorney and staff. Okay. Let's let staff go first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mark Munzer, Director of Community Development. I will be brief in reference to the other presentations. Oh, thank you, Alderman. The subject site, again, is located at 1515 Chicago Avenue. It is located in a D4 zoning district, a downtown zoning district.
What it is, it's
Yes, it is a proposed extended stay hotel that's a proposed Hyatt House is the hotel flag as it stands today. It's in a downtown district. Everything that you see in purple is various downtown districts, D1 through D4. And then, so all around the site to the north and to the south, and then to the east of the site is R6, which is a higher density multifamily residential district. And then, of course, to the south is Raymond Park. The proposed elevation, so this took a lot of work to get to this point with the community, with staff, and certainly with the applicant. The applicant is going to address a lot of this, so I'm just going to be very brief in my comments, other than to say we are very happy with the elevation as it stands today. It is, it is a brick facade on predominance of the building. It includes metal cladding on the sides to give it a distinctive feature. You'll hear a lot about the top hat feature, which is a requirement of Hyatt. When this first came out in the previous renditions, that hat was very big, and we've managed to make it more of a beanie, if you will. but it is definitely more appropriate. It's within scale. It's 8 stories. We've also addressed a lot of what's going on the base of the building. So it's a 2-story base, so it matches in scale to the historic building to the south. And we've also worked with the applicant to include a lot of windows and glass along the Chicago Avenue frontage to engage with the pedestrian activity outside of there. And I will also mention that originally the base was more of a limestone product, not actual limestone, in an attempt to match what is predominant building material on Chicago Avenue. But it was determined that without it being, a real limestone, that it was better to make this building have a distinctive feature to it. And we really believe that they have gotten to that point. Briefly, this is the site plan. Again, the applicant will primarily address it, but I will just orient you. This is Chicago Avenue. What you see there are 3 new 6-inch caliper trees, which the applicant will be adding as a public benefit. In this area is the dining and lounge area. Again, these windows will be open to Chicago Avenue. This will be a public facility, so a public restaurant and lounge, which was also a conversation with the applicant throughout this process. And then it also includes a business area and meeting rooms. So everything in white is open to the public or to guests, and then the gray is back of house operations, so break rooms, laundry, etc. To the rear of the property, where we like to see parking in the downtown district, so it is shielded from the primary street, Chicago Avenue, is parking for 35 spaces, 34 of which are compliant. There is 1 compact space, which would be the 35th space, but is not compliant with the zoning ordinance, so we count it as 34. They are accessed from the east-west alley and the north-south alley. There's 2 points of ingress and egress. I won't go into great detail on this. This is just showing compliance with the underlying zoning, which again is D4. I will highlight that in terms of height, you are allowed to build up to 85 feet in this district, which is what the applicant is proposing. And the FAR, the floor area ratio, you're allowed to build up to 4.5. This project is a 3.49, so it's significantly below what they technically could build to. These are the site development allowances. So they're seeking 3 different development allowances, and they all deal with the parking as it abuts to the north, the east, and the south. So in this particular zoning district, it calls for a required 5-foot setback, from the property line. And on those 2 areas, or 3 areas, the north, the east, and the south, they are proposing a 0-foot setback. And that is in order to accommodate the parking that is needed for the site. Again, they are right at the number of compliant spaces they need to be at. The Elm Street ordinances, which you referenced in your introduction, so there are 2 ordinances. The first one requires, which is 47014, requires the applicant to maintain the elm tree. The elm tree is located in the southeast portion of the site. It would, if you elect to choose to have that tree be retained, it would eliminate 3 of the parking spaces. So that would mean that they would have to come and have a 4th site development allowance, because then that would reduce their number of code compliant spaces to 31 instead of the required 34. So again, you'd go from 3 to 4 site development allowances. And the applicant, as they will explain, objects to this ordinance. Ordinance 53014 allows for the tree to be removed. And that in return, the applicant will plant a 9-inch caliper tree, which is a fairly substantial tree, in the southeast corner of the property. What that involves is a agreement with the property owner to the south, because the tree essentially would be planted between the 2 properties. So it would require one of the spaces on the hotel lot to be converted to a compact space, which again is not code compliant, and also the property to the south. The variation with this ordinance is that if for whatever reason, and it's written into the language of the ordinance, that they cannot come to agreement with the property owner to the south, that they would pay a fee based on the calculation methods in the Urban Reforestation Fund. So there's a third option really in that second ordinance. This ordinance, the second ordinance, also would require a forced site development allowance because they would eliminate the one space and go down to 33 spaces where a minimum of 34 is required. And the second ordinance, 53014, is the ordinance that the applicant concurs with. Here is the site. And this is the elm tree in question. We worked hard to get this site to look like this after the previous use left. So we were able to get it seeded and sodded and looking good. And now that spring is finally sprung, hopefully, it will return to its glory that we wanted it to be. But this tree is the one in question. So a visual for you. Briefly, as you all well know, planned developments require certain public benefits. I will highlight briefly what we have agreed to. And again, we've had very extensive negotiations with this applicant and their attorneys, and primarily have come to agreement on most of the public benefits. They will pay the city for the loss of 2 parking spaces during construction. They will pay, proposing a lump fee of $10,000 for the permanent loss of 2 on-street parking spaces. Using the formula that city staff has developed for other plan developments, that amount, as staff is recommending it, would be $69,405. And again, that's based on a formula that we use based on where the meters are and how often they're used. We have agreed to streetscape improvements on Chicago Avenue, and again, that will include the installation of 3 new street trees, 6-inch caliper trees that are larger than the trees that are in place today. The applicant, after much discussion, has agreed to put on a green roof onto the 2-story portion of the building, and also in something new for us that we will start to be requiring when we require green roofs is they've agreed to a 2-year maintenance plan, because obviously we want, if they are going to the expense and trouble of putting on a green roof, we certainly want to make sure that it is successful. The 5th one is the applicant has agreed to repave the east-west alley upon completion of the project. I believe, as they will address, there's a recognition that during construction and during the operation of this hotel, because the loading and the trash will be off of that alley, that they will be a primary user of it, and they have subsequently agreed to repave that portion. The 6th one, there has been a last-minute change. Initially, the applicant did not agree to hire Evanston residents as a part of this, that they were going to make a good faith effort. I have now been told that they will reference that they will agree to this requirement to hire Evanston residents. The 7th one refers to a wall sign. This has definitely been a priority of staff. We strongly believe that if this is a public restaurant and a public lounge on the first floor of this building, that there needs to be an identifier to the business. I believe it's called H-Bar. The reason we believe that is because we want to make sure that the public knows that it's accessible and that it's a space that is active and lively and does justice to the amount of activity that we currently have on Chicago Avenue, and we certainly will increase, assuming this project is approved. And the last one is the previously referenced tree ordinances. In summary, this has been a good example. We have worked well with this applicant. There certainly are still community concerns, but we have gone to the community several times. The applicant has, and worked closely with the alderman and her community. We as staff believe that it's consistent with the surrounding zoning and the land uses that exist there today. It's compliant with the comprehensive plan and also the downtown plan in terms of a positive land use at this location that will bring upwards of 200 people into our downtown area, patronizing our restaurants and shops and contributing tax revenue to the community. There are design guidelines for a plan development. They meet those design guidelines. They primarily meet the public benefits once we have a resolution on a few of the outstanding ones. And there are various standards of approval for plan developments, as you're aware, and they meet those standards. We recommend approval.
It's always wonderful to have a project that came with a 5-0 recommendation.
Yes.
I mean, just
That's it.
very unusual. Alderman Fisk, would you like to speak? We have 4 people, just so everybody knows, we have 4
The
people
applicant
signed
is-
up.
Doesn't the applicant,
Pardon me?
is the applicant going to?
Yeah, and the applicant is going to speak afterwards.
Okay.
But we have 4 people signed up, 2 of whom are going to make PowerPoint presentations. So
Can
would
we
you-
hear from the applicant first and then?
I would
take public
rather,
comment?
if the applicant doesn't mind, I really don't care, but I think maybe to put the applicant at the end. Where's the applicant?
Right there. Gentleman at this
Do you, when would you like to speak? I'm going to let you choose. Either way. All right.
Tom, why don't we do it first, if you don't mind? Okay.
Okay. Welcome.
Welcome. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members of the Planning and Development Committee, members of the public. For the record, my name is David Reifman, along with Greg Grains from DLA Piper. We represent the applicant. We have our full team available tonight. Tom Blanc, who's the developer and owner-operator, Tom's group. Devin Patterson, the architect from Solomon Cordwell Benz. Mike Sullivan, the general contractor with Peak Construction. Louis Abuna, our traffic consultant from KLOA. And Mel Hoya, the landscape architect from Wolf Landscape Architects. I want to just emphasize from the outset that the approach the developer took to this project was to do something as close to within code as possible with minimal relief in order to have a project that fit in and that could move quickly through the process and achieve approval. Also, no incentives were requested or sought, partly on the grounds of we want to move this forward, get this project moving as quickly as possible. I would like to echo what Mr. Munzer said. We had a very good process with staff. We think we've made tremendous progress on this project. We have some differences, which we will explain in our comments tonight, and also want to commend the Plan Commission for their work on this, as you noted, Alderman Rainey, with a unanimous vote in favor. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Tom Blanc to present the project in a little more detail.
All right, thank you. As David said, my name is Tom Blanc. I'll talk about myself here in a minute. One slight change to the attendees on our end. My partner Gary Janko is also here as well. I cribbed a sheet from our Plan Commission presentation and forgot to update it, so he's here with me as well tonight and can answer any questions if need be. I'm very excited to be here. I think I've communicated with all of you as well as the other aldermen about this project over time, and so it's great to be here. And again, echoing the same comments, I think it's been a very nice process as we've gone through with Mark and his staff. So I understand you guys have been briefed with respect to the project, and I'll try, and I know you have a full agenda tonight, I'll try and work through my presentation fairly quickly. Mark did a good job. He touched on a number of my topics, so I'll try and move this along. And certainly at the end, I'm here and available, as our team is, for any questions that you might have. And I apologize to this side if my back's not turned to you, but I'll try and work off of the screen here to the left. So first and foremost, about me, I'm a 7-year resident of Evanston. My wife and I moved back here from Kansas City. We're originally from the area. And after a long set-out process, we decided we wanted to live in Evanston, and we wanted to raise our future family. We now have 3 kids under 7. And I bring that up because it's important, because we really we want to be here for 20 to 30 years. And so as I look at what I do for a career, it was in part selfish that I wanted to do a project in Evanston and be close to the family. I also think there's an extremely green element to this. The Evanston is certainly out on the forefront of green in terms of requiring LEED Silver right out of the box. I think those are good things. But there's nothing, quite frankly, more green than developing in an urban area where you have multiple modes of transportation, be it the CTA, the metro, what have you. And so that had a very strong allure to me as well. And so I guess the message there simply is that I do care about Evanston. I also think it's important to note, and you're going to hear from some neighbors tonight. I've gotten to know them through this process, and they're very nice people. We don't always see eye to eye, but it's been a very nice process as we've gone through it. I am sensitive to their concerns. I do walk by the site all the time with my family, not particularly this winter, but I do walk by the site all the time. I'm in the neighborhood, and I understand people are going to have views with respect to the exact neighborhood where they live in. As David alluded to earlier, the original approach for this project was to try and do something within the confines of the current code, which was driven by the comprehensive plan, and have a scale of a project that's consistent with that neighborhood. And that was very important to me. I also didn't feel like it was the right path to try and go down an incentive-laden path. There was a residence inn that we were trying to attract early on that ultimately went to Wilmette, and they did get significant incentives to do that. That's not the path we went down. We tried to provide public benefits at the end of the day that were commensurate with the relief that we were seeking, as Mark alluded to, which is essentially a parking setback along the property. We are pretty much in agreement, as Mark had indicated, as we've gone through this process, on everything with respect to the B ordinance, and there are 3 or 4 cleanup items I'd like to cover as I walk through my presentation process here tonight. I would say that the A ordinance for us, and we'll cover it as we go through here, the A ordinance for us is just simply a non-starter. Every parking stall on site is critical to us, and so we can't afford to lose one. In a scenario where we have to maybe convert one to a compact stall, we're willing to do that. But it's important for you folks to know, and I'll explain a little bit about extended stay hotel, that there's requirements for parking, and so to the extent that you can't accommodate them on site from an operational perspective, to have a viable project, you have to accommodate those off-site. And that can be by way of a garage lease down the street at Church Street or a couple of the other garages in the area, or it can be through a private garage lease, literally kitty corner from us across the alleyway. It's an office building that uses the spots during the day. We would tend to use them at night. So I guess I can't impress enough that option A for us is simply one that we won't be able to consider because every parking spot is too important, and we'll elaborate as we go through this. So with that, I'll switch here to the next slide. So as we walk through looking at this site, I've been working on it for over 5 years. We considered multiple types of uses, and ultimately we landed on the extended stay hotel product that Mark referenced earlier. We are working with Hyatt House on their flag, or with Hyatt on their Hyatt House flag, which is their extended stay product. And Hyatt, we have a signed letter of agreement, or letter of intent with them. We have not executed a franchise agreement or anything. We have to get through the entitlement process first before we get there. But we feel very good about that flag, and that's the flag that we want to promote. We think they've got a terrific design. So as we settled on this extended stay, we just thought it was a terrific use for the site. It's important to provide a product that's not represented in the city. It's also not represented in the North Shore. It's going to generate taxes and jobs, and quite frankly, it's a very light use of this site. This is a vacant site currently in downtown, and so as important as we looked at to say, how can we get something that fits in with the context of this neighborhood? I think Mark's chart showed it earlier that the FAR maximum allowed for this site is 4.5. We're only seeking about 3.5 plus or minus, here or there for some, if we convert some kings to queens or something of that nature, but essentially a 22% below the FAR allowance. So if there was something else developed on this site, we think that somebody would probably try to maximize that density. We think, again, that that's a benefit to the neighborhood. With regard to the actual extended stay customer, for those of you who aren't familiar, Marriott Residence Inn is probably the most familiar name in the industry. In terms of the flag, the typical guest tends to stay long-term or longer-term for the hotel industry, which means it's plus 5 days. The typical select service hotel, which would be like the Hilton Garden Inn here in Evanston, or the Courtyard by Marriott would be another good example of a flag that people would understand for select service. Those tend to be plus 2-day stays. The guests tend to be professionals on assignment. They might be with an IT group doing a big project at the hospital or maybe the university. They might be auditors in town auditing the International Rotary, but they tend to be people who are here for a long time. They want a home away from home, they want an office away from the office, and they want some amenities for a social gathering space. Whether or not they want to interact with other people or just be around other people, those things are important to have those common areas. This type of customer has a greater economic spin-off to neighboring businesses than your typical hotel, because they do stay. A lot of the rooms, majority of the rooms actually have kitchenettes in them, so they might go down to Whole Foods or Trader Joe's and actually buy food because they want to do their own cooking as if it's their home away from home. They tend to be budget conscious. There's a discount typically for longer stays in this industry. They're driven by their corporate budgets usually. They have an urban, when they have urban sites like this, they tend not to use their cars because they are budget conscious. That's a hard formula to, quite frankly, figure out, and we really probably won't know till we operate. But our expectation is that a lot of these people that would stay at our hotel will hop a cab from O'Hare because the cost of a rental car per day with the taxes on them is almost more than the hotel room per day. And so if they're on assignment in the Evanston area, they can either walk to it, and maybe they can catch our shuttle van, things of that nature, to find other forms of access there. As I referenced earlier, the last point on that slide is that we are focused on a Hyatt House flag at this stage. This is, to me, the most important slide, and the first bullet point is probably the most important bullet point, and I don't think it gets counted as a public benefit. We call this a project attribute slide, and we think this project is going to drive anywhere from $600,000 to $850,000 a year in net new real estate taxes, net hotel taxes that aren't here today. And so that's a huge influx of income over 20 years. And when we approached this, we thought that would be one of the greatest benefits that people recognized. And so I think that we saw that at the Plan Commission, that really resonated. As Mark alluded before, when I asked him for municipal incentives, the conceptual plans sort of they meet code, but for the exception of these minor parking setback allowances. The project in height in terms of materials fits in with the neighborhood. I talked about the LEED earlier. The hotel product, again, is currently not served in Evanston. It's really underserved on the whole North Shore. We think there's a real market for this type of product. The guests will bring street life and economic activity the periphery need, and I'll loop that in later to a conversation about the restaurant and bar that's been Mark and I's back and forth. The other thing that I can say in today's day and age, we're going to bring 200 new construction jobs for this project, and there'll be 25 hotel operations jobs, and so it's wonderful to be able to say that we're a job creator. And then finally, it's a project that's financeable today in the marketplace. Again, something that's very important to us. As a company, I won't bore you with the details. I think we have a long resume that stands on its own. A lot of you have heard the background on us. Janko Group and Quadrangle are the two entities. They've been around for 25 or 30 years, have a great field of experience across the spectrum. Gary Janko, my partner I referenced earlier, has a firm called Janko Hospitality that's specific to the hotel industry. They have 15 hotels. Most notably, they redeveloped the Marriott out in Naperville, Illinois. It was a failed hotel project, was going through bankruptcy. Gary bought that hotel with the assistance of Peak Construction, who's our contractor, who also did the work at that hotel. That project was gutted. It was a $25 million gut project. And so at the end of the day, they're very proud of it, and they should be. It won the Marriott Opening of the Year when it opened, and that was no small feat, even in a marketplace where there weren't as many hotels opening in the world. It was really a nice accolade, and I think the city of Naperville really worked well with us.
Could I ask
Sure.
you to focus more on the current project?
Sure.
We have, if you look out there, there's a huge crowd out there and
Sure.
another crowd on its way, and we've just got to move along.
Sure. Skipping ahead, no problem. I understand, madam. You're going to be here all night, I understand.
That's really what I was saying.
I understand. So skipping ahead to the site plan, just a couple of the differences we point out. This is a loading zone where the 2 parking stalls that Mark referenced that will be taken out of service. We believe that those parking stalls will be, the parking in that area is not highly used right now at its capacity. It's nothing like at a Davis in Orrington. And so our feeling was that we'll certainly cover those spots during construction, but there had to be a reasonable cap or limitation. We'd offered $10,000. I think the city was requesting $70,000. Everything, again, is budget constrained, and we try to work with, again, the confines of what we're asking for. So those are the 2 stalls in question, and we would ask for, with respect to the ordinance, consideration for our proposal that, again, we think is commensurate with the benefits of the hotel. Mark covered really the site plan. We are going to repave the east-west alley, and so I'll skip ahead here to really one of the other topics, which is the restaurant bar area, which is at this corner. We've got some open windows that will attract street life. The flag does not allow signage. It's a brand standard across the standard. So for their H-bar concept, they never have signage, and so we've gone back and asked them if they would consider this. It's just not something that they do, and so if they have to give us the right to do that, then they've got to change that for everybody else. They've been very cooperative on working with the design of the common areas to make this tight urban site work, but that is an issue. My belief is, if anybody knows the Union down the street, it has a very small sign. It's about 1 by 2, and you never see the signage, but you have big glass windows. They're all lit up. People are naturally attracted to it, and you go there. And so we would hope that that item would come off the table as well. These are views. I'll click through here real quick. Sorry to go back. Of the common area, restaurant, bar, lounge area that you can see the bars in the background. Here's a little close-up picture of it. Again, trying to move along here a little bit faster. This is another version of the site plan, and here I'm circling the proposed tree that we have indicated for the site. Currently, the existing elm is right about here. I can only tell you all that I would love to save that tree. We've done everything we can to try and find a way to do it. If we were to even try and keep it, we don't think it would live. And so what we have proposed is to put in the correct species going forward and upsize that to a 9-inch caliper tree so that we can take this off the table. We've talked to the neighbor to the south. They are receptive to modifying their parking stall to a compact stall so that we can put a new tree in. But to keep the existing tree, because of construction and engineering constraints, is just not feasible. There's an underground detention system required that's in this complete area right here, and you'd have to lose 3 to 5 parking stalls. And as I said, with respect to Ordinance A, losing a parking stall just simply is not an option for us. Going further, there is an outdoor terrace here at the corner that's going to play off nicely from the Giordano's patio. The pool may or may not stay. We've designed this so that parking will work if the pool goes away and we had 3 or 4 rooms. The next slide shows the green roof here. This would be a typical 4-inch sort of sedum tray like you see throughout the city. That's been wonderfully successful, and we're happy to do a 2-year warranty. We want to see that green roof succeed as well. It'll benefit our guests as well. Back to the tree topic, we would also do a 2-year warranty on the 9-inch tree to make sure that takes in the alley. To have a tree in an alley is still somewhat unique, obviously, and given that size, sometimes you can have transport shock, so we would do that as well. So I think I have covered everything that wasn't covered, with the exception of well, Mark had pointed out on the resident hiring. It wasn't that we were opposed to hiring residents. It was just simply that should we be required to, or should the standard of care simply be good faith efforts? And we think that standard of care should be good faith efforts, and we will happily proceed forward to try and do that. So with that, that's the abbreviated version of the proposal. My wife tells me I'm verbose all the time, Alderman Rainey, so understand.
I just wanted us to focus on this project. I mean, we know Hyatt. It's
sure.
Wonderful.
So with that, I would turn it over to any questions you would have, or if you want to ask questions of me after the public comment.
Okay. I want to turn the light on. Okay. Let's wait, okay? Let's get the public comment in the way. Thank you. Do not leave. Virginia Beatty? Where's Virginia? There she is. Virginia, where we really just hand it to somebody, they can pass it out for you. We really do not have time.
You all have a picture, and I won't have to talk as much.
I can pass them down.
Okay. Okay. The next person is going to be Michael Taft. Would you please be ready so that we can move along? Okay.
He's the one that has.
Good evening. My name is Virginia Beatty, and I live at 1509 Forest Avenue in Evanston. and I'm here to speak for the big tree. On the first page, we have 4 and 5, and on the next page, I have a picture of the tree showing you how large it is. Now, it fits in with the rest of the neighborhood, and the fact that it's 36 inches in diameter at its base and 34 inches in diameter, up 4 feet 5 and 4 feet 0.5. That's 4.5 feet. And I just wanted you to take a look at where it's located currently. It's on the back, and the tree is outlined. This is a tree that's probably 150 years old. It's an elm. It's in very good condition, and it probably could go for another 100 years. It's adjusted to the soil conditions there. The one thing I'm concerned about is replacing it with a 9-inch tree, because that will have a root ball that's about this wide. And how are you going to squeeze it in, and what kind of roots is it going to have coming into soil that is pretty well compacted? The Green Evanston, I think, would be more interested in having a tree that can handle a lot more carbon dioxide and produce a lot more oxygen. And as a matter of the proposed hotel there, I think it would be rather pleasant to have a nice big canopy with shade underneath than to have a little tree that will be a baby for the next 30 or 40 years. The tree is located, well, if there's a row of cars behind it, as we saw in the picture there, then it's in front of that row. And there seemed to be on the picture I saw space underneath the tree, which might make a very pleasant place for people to go out and get a little bit of fresh air, and the people in the rooms up above would be able to look out onto a green tree or a tree with birds and that sort of thing, squirrels, rather than an alley. That would give it a sort of a second face. I just want you to be thinking about the size of the tree that would be replaced with something like this, and the height of it, and the fact that it could shade that whole area there and make it a very pleasant amenity for the, are we calling a hotel or extended stay hotel? How extended is the stay going to be? I mean, are you pitching for a week or a month, or for old people? Okay, thank you very much.
Old people can stay.
Old people can stay there too.
Oh, you stay all over the place, you know that. Thank you.
Mark? Mike? Okay. Mr. Taft.
Good evening. I'm Mike Taft. I'm the president of the Evanstonian Cooperative Apartments. 1508 Hinman. Our building overlooks the site. I live on the 8th floor and have been observing the site since I lived there. My background is I'm a construction professional. I've been in commercial and industrial and heavy construction since 1968. By trade, I'm a structural iron worker. Right now, I'm a safety director for Taylor Woodstone Builders, which is a joint venture. We have offices in Bloomington, Minnesota, and Las Vegas, Nevada. We construct primarily tribal building. A lot of hotels. We're hospitality constructors, as well as health care clinics and things like that.
We'll
we operate.
Stipulate to your qualifications. Could we just?
Okay.
We accept that you know what you're doing.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Pardon me? Okay.
There you go.
This is not me. Well, I'm here to speak about, certainly I'm here to support. Would you move that over, please? Thank you very much. Once again, this is 15. I'm going to be talking about porous asphalt paving. project safety and trying to get special assessment for the 50/50 alley that we talked about. You know, one of the things about Evanston is it rains a lot here, and you know, a good idea would be to keep the rain that falls in Evanston, and we can do that with porous paving. I had a meeting with city staff here last Thursday, had a fellow named Andy Schmidt from Payne and Dolan, a major paving contractor that we have used on our projects, and we visited with staff and engineers and things like that, and they were very supportive of that. This is the alley that is behind our home. This is the north-south alley. You can see it's very, very degraded. There's a lot of spalling and fragmentation. There's a paving brick substrate on this thing. It is a heavily impacted, poorly maintained surface right now. The brick substrate, as I said, is loose and fragmented material. This material, the gravel, if you will, it's all, you know, as the pavement deteriorates, and you can see that long line of grit. Okay, that ends up in the sewers, folks. And here's the Edison Vault. This is right at the intersection of the east-west and north-south alley. You can see how it percolates down into and falls into just about anywhere that gravity will take it. You know, the inbound traffic to the paved lot would be affected if we did, in fact, put in porous paving in the parking lot, is the city staff has suggested. Tracking this material into the porous parking lot would severely impact the performance of the parking lot. Okay, now community safety. This is one of the things I wanted to focus on quite a bit. That's what I am. I'm a safety director. I've, you know, loaded bodies out of construction sites, so I know what the hell I'm talking about. This is a very, very dangerous site. And this is the east-west alley, and I'm just wondering what the constructors are going to do with crane placement and crane use along this area. You know, the way that they've proposed to put the crane pad, that would be an overhead tower crane, that would be on the west side of this existing pole. I don't know if the city plans to have it moved or changed or whatever, but if that sucker's going to stay there, you're going to have a heck of a lot of problems, because from the north border of the alley, that is the property line, to the north wall of the 8-story structure, that's about 29 feet. When you have a crane, you can't come within 20 feet of those overhead lines, which constricts that north-south dimension to about 9 or 10 feet. So here, you know, here's this single pole. It has all these multiple lines that go to these different businesses here. No crane loads within 20 feet of that, okay? So you can't have them, you know, over the alley, and you can't have them within the site if they're closer than 20 feet, and that's an OSHA regulation, by the way.
Okay, I'm going to stop you 1 second. Tom, could you come up and address this? This is the reason, Alderman Fisk, that I wanted the developer to go last so they could respond to this. Could you, I'm sure you've built one of these things before, and you're familiar with OSHA and safety. And
I would just say our general contractor's here. He's been with us through the whole process, P Construction, and I think to answer it in a general way, P Construction was a contractor of the year in 2012 and 2013 for all of Chicago, and they don't get to that point without being safety conscious, and so we'll address the means and methods of construction appropriately.
Okay, well, just to get back to that, if you see this guy line that goes through the tree, it comes from the pole to the tree. It's a very, very constricted site. Now, the proposal is to build right to the property line, which means that to lay brick for the east wall of the 8-story structure, that's going to be directly above the alley. These are the scaffolds that are used right now currently that you can see over at Northwestern University. They're about, where's the little thingy here? They're about 12 feet wide, which means that if they in fact propose to use some sort of scaffolding devices like this to lay this brick directly over the property line, that will have to project, the scaffolding will have to project over the alley. So these are the questions that the neighborhood has, that I have for Mr. Sullivan and Peak Construction and for the developers. Do we have a safety plan at this time? Who is your safety director? What's the extent of his training? When does Peak propose to meet with the community and city to develop a 1515 site-specific safety plan, which, as a constructor of our magnitude, we have every project we have is a site-specific safety plan, and has Peak Construction built with a tower crane in such a constricted site? Where have they done that? Can you answer that, Mr. Sullivan?
Well, I think I'm going to let our staff deal with this, because our staff has requirements also. Mr. Munzer, could you?
Well, that's the end of my comments.
Let me just tell you something. I told you you could have 5 to 10 minutes.
Right.
We're not going to beat this to death, the safety issues. They're going to perform in a safe manner. We have a staff who is highly skilled to oversee these things. I know you think probably nobody knows what you're talking about, but we do. Mr. Munzer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Prior to a building permit being issued, we certainly, as we do with any project of this magnitude, have a meeting with the developer, with the contractor, with anybody involved in construction, and come up with a construction management plan. And in that, we talk about the staging of the construction, where the equipment is, how the trucks access the property, the hours of operation. If scaffolding or some equipment was required in the alley, we would certainly ensure that the placement of that equipment would still allow access to the alley for the residents that are on the block. We've done it on previous projects, prior to my tenure here at the Mather, close by, and we certainly will pay close attention to it.
Well, in the last 15 years, this town has built a tremendous number of large buildings. Alderman Holmes, thank you.
No, I was just going to ask you if you could ask the staff to address that, because I assumed that we had. So thank you.
All right. We're going to wind it up. Okay.
Well, that's pretty much the extent of my comments. I'd also want to, entertain the idea of the special assessment 50-50 for porous paving.
When you say 50-50, the neighbors and the developer sharing?
Well, no, I'm not sure quite how this works. I just got this information.
Well, if that's in fact how it works. Both sides of the alley helps pay.
Right. Well, if that's the case, that's what we'd like to pursue, and we would like to see that porous paving is used on that alley.
Well, I'll tell you what, we have one of those alleys in the city of Evanston, and it's on Dobson between Asbury and Ashland. And it's like 4 times the price of a normal alley with regular drainage structures installed. So
4 times?
3 or 4 times. It's hugely expensive, ridiculously expensive, but it works well. It's a beautiful alley, and the neighbors love it. And I would suggest that perhaps a meeting with the developer and the Public Works Director to discuss that.
We would certainly appreciate that. One thing you should understand, too, with porous paving in this parking lot is that it would decrease significantly the amount of storm retention structure that the contractor and the developers would have to put in.
We have one in the whole city of Evanston.
Well, you should also understand that between Davis, which has been just repaved, Grove is repaved, we've got nice clean streets all around it. You put in porous between that whole area, you have a lot of good water infiltration, sustainability, green, the usual Evanston formula for success.
Well, in order to pave that alley, you're going to have to get 51% of all the people abutting the alley.
We look forward to trying that.
Good. I think it's a fabulous idea.
I do too.
Okay, great. All right, next on our list is Ms. Westerberg.
She's the other presentation.
Yeah. But we have one.
So I think that is the PowerPoint there. Right. That's the one. The other one that you had up before, no problem. There we go. Thank you. This is the last in a series of meetings we've had, obviously, with the city and the developer. I'm sorry, I'm Christine Westerberg. I'm president of the 525 Grove Condo Association.
Can I tell you something?
Yes.
In a previous life, I managed your building. Beautiful.
Do you want to come back, try it again? No, we've appreciated the ability to talk with the developer and the city on a number of issues. We've been able to have some addressed. We really have one serious concern remaining, and let's see. Whoop.
To the right.
There we go. It really has to do with setbacks, and you've heard that already, I think, in terms of the impact on a couple of areas. And they really are the east lot line of the proposed plan and the setback at the south lot line. And obviously here, you can see the east line alley is right here, 12 feet wide, and then at the south lot line. This is a highly traveled alley. Sorry. Whoops. It's commercial traffic, residential traffic, as well as pedestrian. And we do have adjacent buildings on the east side of the alley which obey or follow the requirement for a 5-foot setback. You can see here with the red line where the alley is. This is the setback for 500 Davis and 1516. This is the setback for 1508. And you can see with some of the parking spaces at 1516, there's a little more room behind the cars. I think the concern for the neighbors who live right across from the proposed hotel would be with cars parked all the way to the lot line, there would not be as much swing space or flexibility for cars coming through that alley. Now, it is true that the previous building on that site, which was the Heil and Heil building, did have cars parking in the lot behind the building, but that was a gravel lot, and cars tended to park a little haphazardly, not exactly lined up row to row, and they rarely came that close to the actual lot line, at least not all the way to it. So the concern is simply that we don't feel, without some type of setback there, that the development does meet that standard for preventing undue traffic congestion. Now, we know that alleys are busy all throughout the city. We're not the only one. But safety in an alley is a serious concern, and we would appreciate a little more time, I guess, that the city could take into looking into this. We were a little disappointed that at the Plan Commission meeting in March, one of the commissioners suggested that, and this was taken from the video, part of urban living, one could say, is the enjoyment of having to engage in conversations and interactions with people who initially are an encumbrance to you. But upon engaging them, you realize, you know, that we're in this together and we can work this out. And I've just had a positive interaction with a service delivery man who's apologized to me, and he will be moving his car so I can get out of my parking space. It's a nice scenario, but it doesn't really always happen. And for some of our older residents, it's perhaps not the easiest thing to engage in urban interaction when you're trying to move your car. So we would just request that this be seriously considered as you consider the setback proposal. Finally, we have our existing tree. You've heard about this already. This is at the south lot line. We do understand the developers' concerns on this, and they're feeling that this is a non-starter. But again, we feel that this is a significant natural feature that already exists, and that is and should be part of the consideration for a new development. Different trees can be added at different parts in the city. We understand that. But sustaining and preserving what we already have seems to us to be an important thing for the city of Evanston. We would encourage, again, some consideration for keeping that tree, for reducing parking spaces, or at least considering porous asphalt in that parking lot, which might reduce some of the need for storm water detention. Those really are our main concerns, and we thank you for your consideration.
Next is Robert Mack, I believe. Robert Mack. Mr. Mack.
Good evening. My name is Robert Mark.
Mark, I'm sorry.
I have credentials that don't matter here. They are, I'm a clinical psychologist and a corporate consultant.
Oh, we need you.
And as I said, I recuse myself from assisting. I live at 1508 Hinman, Unit 3D, which my wife and I purchased because of the beautiful view of the tree. That's neither here nor there as well. I'm going to keep this short. I understand the needs of the commission to move ahead. I agree with the prior two speakers, and I just want to emphasize that, quite frankly, 34, 5, 6 spaces is, by the way, not adequate to a 100-room plus facility. And even the belief that there are rental spaces to be had nearby is also somebody's pipe dream. It's going to create an undue additional number of parkers on the streets, which the city, in its interest for taxes and parking ticket fees and the rest of it, will probably greet, because we get plenty of police who come around and ticket cars already. It's quite jammed. So, you know, quite frankly, you knock off one space to save a tree, 3 spaces to save a tree. It's irrelevant in the scheme of things if they're going to rent spaces anyway. Secondly, the issue of more space for people to park so that the few people who come there, primarily workers, I would believe, who primarily are going to drive F-10s and pickup trucks of some form or another, or larger than another, you need the extra setback for that. And then I have an issue that nobody else has raised, which is probably totally ridiculous, and so I'm just going to mention it. I have a problem with an extended stay facility having a bar. Call it a lounge, call it a place to meet and greet whoever you're going to meet and greet, which I have problems with late into the evening, particularly since right next door is Vinix, where a person could walk and buy as much wine, liquor, or anything else and drink it in their room, which has a kitchenette and ice, and they don't need to have a bar. You want to put a bar in the restaurant and serve food with it, which is an old Evanston tradition. I've been here for 35 years, and I actually lived here 6 years prior to that for the prior 15 years. It's an old Evanston tradition. You eat and drink. You don't sit and drink late into the night. My only last piece is that north-south alley, I must tell you, has trucks that come and park and leave their motors running all the time that they're there, which may be hours on end, which when I ask them to shut them off, they say, well, I might not be able to start the truck. So we have diesel trucks that just grind away for an hour or two while they're doing whatever they're doing. We also have, unfortunately, garbage trucks that pick up garbage in the morning before 7 a.m., throw their trucks into reverse, and we have that wonderful safety beep that occurs when there's nobody out on the street, or in the alley, I should say, which I find also rather heinous at 6 o'clock in the morning. And I would suggest that you have, the city should have some real restrictions on the use of those alleys and when they can deliver, pick up, remove, whatever they're picking up, delivering, or removing. Thank you.
Just so you know, we do have restrictions. And second of all, in addition to restrictions, you are not allowed to idle. We have an ordinance that disallows idling. So
I agree, but when I call the police, they don't get there anywhere near quick enough.
Well,
and I do call the police.
There's police right out there. We'll talk to them about it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. That appears to be the end of our citizen comment, and I'm going to open this up for discussion. And whether or not the committee wants to play a role. Alderman Fisk, just 1 second. Sure. We're going to need to decide which ordinance we want to move on. So, okay. Alderman Fisk.
Thank you, Alderman Rainey. I'm going to suggest that we move ahead with P4, which is Ordinance 47014, that requires the preservation of the elm tree. First of all, I want to thank Tom and his team. I think they've been great throughout the process, and more than willing to meet with the neighbors, and in one case, a team of architects, and I think the project is much better now than it was when we started out. And because you live in Evanston and you knew where we could find you, I always hoped that you would respond well to that, and you did, and thank you again. We've had some really interesting discussions about porous paving material, and now I know a lot more about it than I did before. And one of the interesting things is that, as Mr. Taft suggested, the use of porous paving in that parking lot would result in a smaller water detention tank than would be needed otherwise. And that could help to not only, as he said, keep the stormwater there in the street and not overwhelm our sewers, but would also be a public benefit, and I think moving toward the city council goal of sustainability. Along with that, we have to also consider the idea of taking down a 150-year-old elm tree that is in healthy condition. At previous meetings with neighbors, they talked about, especially the folks that live over on Grove, the folks that live on Hinman, that's the only tree. They look out on it. There are birds that nest in the trees. There are birds that sing in the trees. There are squirrels that run up and down the trees. It's a really unusual situation for an urban area, and one that we should try, I think, to preserve. So whatever we can to encourage the developer to do that, I would like to do. Mr. Mark suggested that perhaps there was the loss of a parking space or two where we could move them into the 500 Davis Street building or something else was not such a big deal. I agree with that. I think we could find another place to put parking spaces. It's interesting that referring to the removal of 2 on-street parking spaces when we're talking about the $10,000 or the $69,000 and weighing those two things. That is a street that is heavily parked. I go over there all the time, and so I'm always looking for a parking space. We're willing to remove those 2 spaces on the street in order that your project can be successful, and we want it to be successful. But we'd also like you to consider just amending that parking around the tree to retain the tree. I don't think that, I don't really feel comfortable in sharing a new tree with a neighboring property owner. Those sorts of things never work out well. When somebody needs or wants to take the tree down, then you're dealing with two property owners for a new tree. And I'm not sure of the success of the location of that tree or how long it will remain there. It certainly won't provide the kind of benefit that the public has grown used to in terms of observing and enjoying the tree that's there now. And I do agree with Ms. Beatty that I think the residents of the hotel would love to look out their windows and see a large tree. So I just would very much like to encourage you to find a way to do that. We've had these conversations before, so you know how I feel about that. But I think that is something that you can do. And regarding the setbacks, we've had this conversation at council or P&D recently about the alley at Main and Chicago Avenue, where we had pictures during the winter and the congestion in the alleys. That's a situation where you find all the time where alleys in commercial areas abut alleys in residential areas, and it's not a very compatible situation. We've lived with it over the years, but I think the setbacks are really important, and I think the south and the east side setbacks are ones that we should try, if there's any way at all, to maintain. I understand how far you want to build out, but is there a way to cantilever out a little bit to allow the setback, but still allow your building to do what you want it to do on the alley? And finally, infill sites are always fascinating, and you have a lot of neighbors, as you know, who have lived there for a long time, who with a pretty small one-story office building, and now they're looking at a large building going in. We've had over the years historically 2 buildings that have failed to move forward on this site. And I commend the developer for coming in with a building that, and fronting his building in such a way that it really is a thoughtful positioning of the building that will preserve as much view as possible. You didn't mention that in your presentation, but I think all of the neighbors really appreciate that. So I think the good trade-off is parking spaces on Chicago Avenue, a couple fewer parking spaces in the parking lot, keep the tree, consider the setbacks, and then I'm sure we have a 5-0 vote.
I don't think so. Alderman Fisk, I just want to point out that I have here a letter from Paul D'Agostino, who, in conversation with Mark Younger and examination of the tree, there is a very dire prognosis for the tree, regardless of what happens, based on the construction process in general. And I'm going to have Mark put this on the website so people can read this, but I want to read the last paragraph, and that is, Paul is saying, he's our arborist, I question the survivability he's talking about the tree, with the whole construction process in general. The need to trim a majority of the crown off, the compaction of the root zone, and the potential damage to the trunk and major limbs during actual construction will likely make any efforts to preserve the tree ineffective with a project of this size on this parcel. And that is just a conclusion after bullet points as to what this tree is going to go through.
I understand what you're saying, Alderman Rainey, and
I'm not saying it, he's saying
well,
it.
I understand what you're reading then.
Right.
Mr. D'Agostino also referred to the tree as a healthy, thriving tree.
He said it is a good
tree. Yeah, it's a good tree.
It is before construction.
Mm-hmm. And let me tell you another thing that's going on in the First Ward that you, I'm sure, remember, and that is that at the Kendall site, we have 3 very ancient oak trees, and we took great pains with the developer to protect those oak trees with the understanding that every attempt would be made to preserve them, and I think the developer has been fairly good, although I'm worried a little bit about how close construction is coming to them. But the fact is that that's a priority, and if the developer is willing to do that, and the neighbors are certainly willing to take the chance, they, I believe, understand that there's no guarantees. There's no guarantees with living things. I mean, the tree may survive, the tree may not survive. If it doesn't survive, then the developer gets his parking spaces back. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't take every opportunity to try to save that tree during construction and after construction. And I think that's the point that some of the neighbors have been making in previous meetings about the use of porous material and, the ability to keep construction at least within a reasonable area. I think Virginia Beatty again referred to this. This tree has been there for so long. Its roots are really down. I mean, its roots are not at the surface as if a new tree were being planted. It's going to be able to withstand a little bit heavier impact than a newer tree would, but I think it's worth the effort. And again, if the tree doesn't survive, he gets a couple parking spaces back.
I don't think you should minimize that like that. Anyway, okay, so does anybody have anything else to say? Alderman Wilson, Alderman Holmes, Alderman Tennant? Yes, on P4.
And there's no reason we can't advance.
No, I guess there's, I mean, I guess not. So would you like me to call a vote on P4?
Sure.
All right. Has it been seconded? It's not been seconded. Did you second it? I didn't second it. Did you second it?
I guess what I'd like to do is suggest maybe we can have an understanding, we can advance them both and let the full council discuss them both, the merits of both. And that'll make the voting process a little easier.
Well, I mean, it's it's on the floor. Is there a second to this?
I'll second it.
All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor of forwarding P4 to the council, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. All right, so it was 3-2. All right, I'll entertain a motion on
I'd like to make a
P5.
motion to advance P5.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, so I'm not familiar with having done anything quite like this before, but Alderman Wilson, is your light on?
It was just for
All right,
purposes
so
of...
they're both on we've resolved absolutely nothing. They are both on the council agenda for introduction. So, could I have a motion to adjourn? Wait, is there
Chair,
something
Madam Chair,
else?
I'm
Wait,
sorry.
Wait, I'm sorry.
I was just going to note.
The housing, I'm sorry.
That's all right, Madam
That
Chair.
was very interesting, okay.
I just want to. I wanted to say that we can, given the timing of the evening, we can continue the discussion to another time. I just wanted to note that they were in the packet. Information on the Evanston Housing Corporation. I will address PD2 at a future meeting.
Okay, that's fine. But on the Evanston Housing Corporation update, I read that several times, and one of the things that I would like to know is what are the implications for the people with those loans should they be sold or transferred? And I'm not sure. I don't quite understand. It was very complicated, and some very smart people who are involved on the board. Very interesting, but could we get a little better memo? I mean, what we had were the minutes, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
Could you give us a little more
Yes.
focused? Yeah.
Right. So after the May board meeting, we'll have direction from the board as to hopefully how to proceed. But we can certainly revise the memo. In a nutshell, it's better for the homeowners for us to move forward and either have somebody else service the portfolio or sell it.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that. But I would like to know what the status of the individual loans.
And we will have that once we have the appraisals.
All right. And there was an argument made at that meeting that perhaps appraisals aren't all necessary. I know our staff was pushing for appraisals, but one of the board members representing one of the banks, I'm not sure which, argued that since we were a public body, maybe there was not any. I thought it was very confusing.
Okay. But there was an affirmative vote by the board to proceed to get the appraisals.
Okay. All right. Okay, all those in favor of adjourning say aye. Aye. Any opposed?